So many adoption stories start with a child being abandoned, or they start with a child being adopted, but rarely do we take the time to consider the birth parent side of things. Hello and welcome to Not Made in China, the podcast sharing unfiltered, honest conversations about adoption and the beautiful madness that comes with it. I'm your host, Shaosheen, and in today's episode, I had the pleasure of chatting to Mackenzie. Mackenzie was 17 when she fell pregnant and made the decision to make an adoption plan for her daughter. Today, we chat about what led her to this decision, how she navigated its highs and lows, and how she maintains a good relationship with her daughter's adoptive parents today. We've got a lot to chat about, so let's jump into it, and I hope you enjoy eavesdropping on our conversation. Mackenzie, welcome to Not Made in China. I'm delighted to have you on, and thank you very much for joining me.
Of course, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
I'm super excited to get into it, and well, let's do that. So I'd love to have a little bit of context as to what was it that led you to making an adoption plan for your daughter?
So I got pregnant when I was 17, and it was like my senior year of high school. So there was a lot happening in my life. And I kind of just got to a point where I decided that having a baby and being a mom was not something I was ready for. And so I decided to go ahead and make an adoption plan and find a family for my baby. So that way she could grow up and be healthy and have everything that someone could want for a baby.
Of course. And one thing that I find really interesting is that you don't use the phrase gave your child up for adoption. You use an alternative phrase. So I'd love to know why you don't use that phrase, and also if you could share the one that you do choose to use.
Of course. So I choose to use the phrase adoption plan. And actually, I had somebody tell this to me that like years ago, the term giving up for adoption came from when people would put babies on trains and send them all over the country. And then people would just kind of pick up those babies from train stations. And that's basically kind of what they did when people like didn't want their baby. And so it always kind of comes with like a negative connotation. Like I gave my baby up for adoption. Like sometimes people might look at you a little funny. So like in a more positive way to also for your own kind of happiness and like peace of mind, it's to like, they say you can use the term make an adoption plan.
Do you feel that phrase kind of embodies more of what really happened for you?
Yes, I do, very much so.
And I'd love to know what some of the key factors were in making that decision, because I can't begin to imagine where you'd even start with something like that.
Yeah. So like I said, I was 17 when it happened. Kind of like right before it happened, there was a lot of talk of, where was I going to go? Like college, university, like what was the next like big step in my life? And then I kind of got hit with this, I'm pregnant. So it was a very big kind of turning point of like, I'm not deciding where I'm going to school. I'm not deciding what's happening with this baby inside of me. And ultimately, I decided that adoption was the way to go just because I was like, again, I'm 17. I'm not ready to be a mom yet, but there is someone out there who is. And so I think really around like the halfway mark of my pregnancy, I buckled down and was like, I have to like grow up real quick and understand that I have to do what's best for her. And sitting here playing back and forth with my decisions is not it. And I need to choose, I'm keeping her or I'm doing adoption.
It must have been an incredibly challenging time for you. Are there any particular challenges that you remember going through?
I remember, well, I've always wanted to be a mom. Like that's always been like something I've looked forward to in life. And so finally getting pregnant, I kind of was like, I'm finally getting that. But I was so young that it was like, am I ready for this? Because there are people who get pregnant in like their 30s and stuff, and they're financially stable and they're ready and they have everything. But even then, they don't feel ready. And so I kind of just decided that it was like, I'm 17. As much as I want to be a mom, and this is something I've looked forward to, I have later down the road to do this again and do it the right way. And right now, by choosing adoption, I can give someone else something that they've longed for but couldn't possibly do.
It's a hugely brave choice to make. And did you find you had family and a network around you to support you through it?
I did, yes. My family was very supportive and, they were there with me through everything. And I had a bunch of friends who would come and, we would talk and we would hang out. And I definitely did have a very large support group with me through the whole thing. And I'm very grateful for that.
I'm so glad. And when it came to actually working through the process, what did that look like for you and where did you start?
Like the adoption process.
Yes, the adoption process.
So I had talked with some family friends of ours about, picking an adoption agency and stuff. And it's a funny story, actually, because I had been recommended an adoption agency to, look through families through there. And we had given them a call, but it was right around Christmas break. And so they weren't really answering. And they were like, we'll get back to you sometime in the new year. But also in that time, somebody had reached out and said, I know a family who might be interested in adopting. So I had reached out to the agency and this family around the same time. And the family had actually gotten back to me, first. So I met with like this lovely couple and I sat down and had like coffee and like we talked. And right after that, I was like, okay, I think you guys are the people I'm choosing. And they were like, well, let's not rush it. And I was like, I'm pretty certain in this choice that
Oh.
you guys are what I want. And because I didn't go through an agency, we hired a lawyer who specialized in this kind of thing and did all the legal and proper paperwork for it. But I was really lucky.
They sound like wonderful people. And was there anything particular about them that made you think, yes, they're the right people? Or was it more of a gut instinct?
It was a bit of both. It was after talking to them, it was like I know you guys are the people I want. And like they just, I don't want to say perfect because nobody's perfect, but they just seemed like a very good fit. And I think it was kind of fate that, I had reached out to them in this adoption agency at the same time. And the agency was like, we'll get back to you later. But this family had gotten back to me sort of right away and kind of like this is what you were meant to choose.
It sounds like it was meant to be in many ways.
Yes.
And how long did the whole process take in the end?
Oh gosh. I know it took a couple months. So in January, we had started kind of like the paperwork and filling out like my history and stuff and getting all of that. And then I had given birth in April. And so we finished up all the legal paperwork in April in the hospital. And actually, in the hospital, I had signed the papers giving away my rights to her. And so the parents were able to leave the hospital with her right after that.
Wow. And how did it feel for you in that moment?
I felt really numb, I think, for like a long time after that, just because I had grown accustomed to this thing being with me all the time. And suddenly it's not a part of me anymore. But I was sad, but I watched them like walk away, like to their car. And I like kind of knew that I was like, I'm making the right choice. Like, this is what was meant to happen. And she's going to be happy. She's going to be good.
I think it's incredible that you had such a strong feeling about it, even in such a vulnerable moment. So it must mean
Yeah.
it really was the right thing. And again, I'm genuinely in awe of the decision you made. I think I have so much respect for it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And in terms of the actual adoption itself, so am I right in thinking it was an open adoption?
Yes, it's an open adoption. So I see her twice a year, once around the holidays and then once around her birthday.
Nice. And what's your relationship like with the adopted parents now?
It's good. I think at first it was a little rocky just because we didn't really know how to navigate it. It was like just kind of this foreign concept of, no one wants to push boundaries, no one wants to say something. But I think now we're in a good place, like we're family friends. We'll reach out to each other every once in a while. Like sometimes when I come home, like we'll get breakfast or something. But it's really good. They often text us with like updates about her life and like what's going on and stuff. So like I'm really grateful for that.
I know you said it was a bit trickier at first, like navigating those boundaries. How did you guys work through those, or was it just more in the fullness of time you just kind of figure it out?
In time, we figured it out. I know one of our questions in the beginning was like, when she gets older and she starts talking, what would she refer to me as? Because yes, I'm her mom in a sense. Like, I gave birth to her, but I'm not the woman who raised her. Like, I'm not her mom. And so, like, that was kind of a conversation we kept going back and forth with a lot in the beginning. But at the end of the day, she kind of just, she calls me by my name, and I'm okay with that.
So you seen as more like a family friend?
Yeah, right now I'm more of a family friend. She'll be 5 this spring. And so I think as she gets older and she can better comprehend and stuff, it's like she'll understand who I really am.
I remember when we spoke last, you said something about after the first 12 months in the US when it comes to open adoption, there aren't so many kind of guidelines or legalities, or there was something around that. I don't know if I've
Right.
completely made that up.
No, you're correct. So what we were told is that for an open adoption within the first year, you kind of set up a connection with the parents, and for the first month, second month, third month, I want to say 6 month and 12, like the 1 year mark of the baby's life, the parents will give you like an update on, what's going on, maybe send some pictures. But after that 1 year mark, they are not required to send you any more updates unless you want them. Or in our case, we had established kind of a relationship. And when I had first met with them, I had told them that I do want to be a part of her life going forward. Like, I want her to be able to ask me questions when she gets old enough and has those questions, and know that I did this out of love and not that I didn't want her. So,
Of course.
um, yeah, for that first year, it's just like updates. And then after that, if they didn't want to, they didn't have to send me anything.
And what did you choose to do in the end?
I chose that I wanted to stay and get the updates. Like, I wanted to continue to see like how she grew and what her interests were. Like, I wanted to know who she was becoming as a person.
Completely understandable. And I know you said now she's getting a little bit older and she's probably more aware of what's going on around her. Have you started to broach those conversations around her adoption?
So it's actually really funny because a couple weeks ago, I got a message. Me and my mom got a message from her mom saying that she'd been asking questions of, why are there no pictures of me in mommy's belly? How come we don't talk about when I was in mommy's belly? Because she now has a little brother who the parents conceived. And so obviously, like, she was a little bit older for when mom was pregnant with him. So she had some questions about, like, why is there none of that for me? Like, why don't we talk about that for me? And I think eventually she is very curious, and they kind of just told her, it's like, you're adopted, like Miss Kenzie, who comes over all the time, who you see at your birthday and Christmas, like, she's your birth mommy, like, you grew in her belly. And because she's so young, I don't think she understood it. And they said she thought it was funny. She laughed. So I think she knows it, but she doesn't understand it.
And it's really good that that you've all broached that with her at such a young age, because I guess now it's just normal to her. And like you said, if she just laughed it off, she probably thought, oh yeah, cool, that's just
Yeah.
normal.
She's like, all right.
Do you think the experience has affected you across your life?
Definitely, it definitely has. Because around the time of her birthday, like, I will get a little more emotional and stuff, because I do realize, like, this time is coming up, and especially with it being such a digital age, like, I've got so many pictures and videos from around that time of, like, leading up to, going to the hospital and giving birth, and then some early pictures of me in the hospital with her. So it's like kind of coming across those is like, in that time, I do sometimes question, like, did I make the right choice by doing this? But it's like kind of after like that week or so, I'm like, I know I made the right choice. I'm just in my feelings right now. But also with dating, sometimes it's hard because she is a part of my life. And so if I do introduce someone new in my life, that's kind of something I have to mention to them. And for some people, like, their first instinct is, I don't I don't want to, be a dad right now. I don't want to, like, have a stepchild. And it's like, that's not the case. She's just kind of here. She's someone in my life. And if this were to get very serious, eventually I would hope that my partner would like to meet her.
Of course.
But I have had some people who upon telling them that, have just completely ghosted me. And
Seriously?
yeah,
I mean, that's rude to start with.
it's very rude, but it's, it's kind of that sign of like they weren't a good person to begin with.
I guess in a way, it's a really quick way to vet who are the good guys and who can get in the
Yeah.
bin.
So I get a good idea of what people's intentions are.
For sure. And it also goes to show how, well, how there's such a lack of understanding around adoption for so many people. And the fact you'd explain this to them, but then they still assume, oh, they're going to have to be a stepdad. And it's like, no, no one's asked you to do that.
Yeah, it's just I'm letting you know that, this is who I am. This is a part of my story. And you have to know this to be with me and be accepting of it.
Absolutely. And it must be, well, it must be good, I guess, good practice for you for sort of setting those really clear boundaries and standards and knowing what you will and won't stand for.
Yeah, I'm very open with it. I don't go like announcing it to everyone I meet like right off the bat. It's something that like if we're friends and we've talked about for a while, I'll kind of like casually slip it into a conversation, and people kind of like for a second they're like, "Wait, what?" And so I am like, "Okay, like here's the story." And most people like are in awe of that because it is a crazy thing to go through at 17. But it's kind of just like, to me, it's like an icebreaker. It's like a fun little story to tell and like a new little information.
And when we spoke last time, I know you mentioned the therapy had been quite a good support system for you.
Yes. So after giving birth, I went to a specialist. I'll have to get the information on what the place was called later, but I went to go see a specialist, like someone who specialized in like adoption cases, for like therapy reasons. And so I talked to her, and the therapist was actually the one who told me about the term adoption plan and using it that way instead of giving up for adoption. And I saw them for a couple weeks, just kind of talking about, how I was feeling, you know, questioning my choices, like where I was at mentally, if I was doing okay. Because even though I didn't keep the baby, I still had all of like the postpartum like side effects and everything that was still like very much affecting me in my day-to-day life.
How was that to navigate? It must have been really challenging and a lot of mixed emotions.
It was hard. I
Yeah.
was very emotional for a very long time, but I think I kept myself busy. It was the end of my like senior year of high school, so a lot was happening. I was going to graduate with my friends. We were going to go to prom and stuff. So there was a lot of things I had to look forward to that I felt like kind of kept me busy in that time and kept my mind off of, like this is this decision I did, and I didn't let it fully consume me and make me a shell of the person who I was before all that.
I can imagine it is easy for it to become all consuming, and it's really good to hear that you didn't let it become that.
Yeah. There were times where it felt really scary, and I would just kind of sit there and like think about all my choices and everything. But like I said, like most times when I do have those thoughts and stuff, at the end of the day, I know I made the right decision.
For sure. And when you are in that kind of headspace of questioning things, how do you manage to pull yourself out of it, or how do you deal with it in those moments?
So a lot of what makes me feel like I made the right decision is that the guy I was with at the time, the baby daddy, he was not in a very good place. And so when I think back to it, and if I had kept her, I probably was going to be doing a lot more damage to my mental health, trying to stay with him and co parent and, work on myself and then raise this baby. So, like, at the end of the day, when I think of where I would be now, had I decided to keep her, I realize I'm a lot better off. I'm a lot happier with my life. And now that she has been adopted, and since the adoption, like I think back and I realize all the friends I've made, all the things I've done, I wouldn't have been able to do had I kept her. Or I don't think I would have had some of my best friends now if I had made that decision.
Of course. And also, it's so lovely hearing you talk about your daughter, and it really feels like everything you've done at each stage is very much for her and for her benefit and what's best for her.
Yes, she's always been a priority in everything I do in my life now. I tell myself that I'm doing it for her because I want her to be proud of me. And, which is funny to think about that I want the approval of a 5-year old. But
It's fair. It's so fair.
yes, but I do it because I want her to be proud of me and I want her to be happy that this was the decision I made for her and to show that it's like I'm making something of myself, by making this choice.
I think it's a fantastic legacy to lead. And also, family can look like anything these days. And I think it's really beautiful the way that you guys have defined yours.
Yes, I'm very happy. And we've always told her that, that my parents are like an extra set of grandparents to her. And, my siblings are like extra aunts and uncles to her and everything, and extra cousins.
And are her adoptive parents keen to keep you guys as like extended family for her?
I think so. Yes, we are very close and stuff, and like we're good family friends, and like we go to her brother's birthdays and stuff. So I feel like as the years have gone on, we've definitely kind of blended more into like a family kind of aspect of it, and not so much kind of strangers dancing around this like kind of plan that we have no idea how to dance around.
Yeah, it feels like you really faced it head on
Yes.
through navigating the open adoption. What do you think it's taught you about family?
It's taught me that family can definitely go through some like rough and bumpy spots. And, like family's not always blood. Like family can be, anyone who can stick by you, like in good times and bad times, and just, the people who are willing to be there for you when you need them most. And, at the fun times too, of course.
100%. And whilst going through all of this, have you encountered many misconceptions around adoption or around making an adoption plan for your child?
Not really. I've had some people who have had questions about, just the whole thing. And that's often when I do tell them that, I use the term adoption plan rather than giving up for adoption. And then I kind of explain the reasoning to them, and they're like, oh, that's actually like really interesting and probably good. And I actually have some friends who now use the term adoption plan rather than giving up for adoption.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's really good. And I think you kind of answered my next question, but I was going to say if there's one thing you wish more people knew around adoption or around what you've been through, what would it be?
I think it's that I know birth moms can sometimes have like a negative, they can be looked at negatively for certain reasons. I know I've had people kind of look at me, and I've actually had someone tell me that what I did was selfish.
Oh my
And
God.
that that kind of hurt because I always thought what I did was selfless in a way
Yeah.
of like I'm trying to give her a better life. But yeah, I think it took a lot of convincing of myself to be like what I did wasn't selfish. I didn't do this so I could go out and like party all the time, because I didn't want her. It was like I did it because I needed to continue to grow and be an adult. And the last thing I think she needed, being a baby who is also trying to grow, was a 17-year-old who had no idea how to be an adult. So like often when like if somebody ever does say now that it's like looks at me funny or says that, like thinks it's selfish, I'm like, I know it's not. And they just, I don't want to say uneducated. That sounds so
I mean, they're
mean.
definitely, well, they're ignorant at the very
Yeah,
least.
it's
Ignorant and
ignorant.
nosy,
Yes.
and they can mind their business.
Right.
But I think you handle it with such grace, and you're so right when you say the most important thing is that you know that you made the right decision, and that she knows that you made the right decision. And just seeing, I can, well, actually, you tell me, just seeing her in a happy family environment, how does that make you feel?
It makes me really happy. And I'm so happy to see that she's a big sister, since I have a little sister. So getting to
Oh,
see her like make her little brother laugh and like joke around with him, it makes me really happy that she's got siblings and she's got, so much love and friends around her. She's very outgoing, and I see her in all these like activities and doing all this stuff, and I'm like, this is right. Like this is where she's meant to be.
That must be really affirming for you.
Yes, it is.
And I know in a lot of adoption stories, I do feel like the birth parents kind of get left out of the narrative, and that the story starts with, oh, the baby was abandoned and then they were rescued by their adoptive parents and happily ever after. Why do you think it's so important that we do talk more about the birth parents' perspective and their side of the story?
I think the birth parents' perspective is really important just because it's like, like I said, people can see it as like selfish and negative. And, that's not always the case. It's sometimes people just looking for, it's them being, smart, in my opinion, and realizing that they can't take care of this baby, they can't provide what it needs. And so they're willing to give up, something that they've created, that they will forever love internally, to a family who will love them and will give them the care that they deserve and need. And I don't want to speak for other birth parents, but when I say it's like, I constantly, like, I love her. And that'll never be a question of if I love her, will I ever stop loving her? It's, I probably love her as much as her parents do.
For sure, of course. Do you know anyone else who's kind of gone through something similar, or were you? Well, I suppose, yeah. Did you have any other points of reference, or were you just navigating it on your own?
We had some family friends of my parents reach out, and they were all stories of them who had been adopted and who had reconnected with their like birth mom or like birth dad later down the line in life, and how like now they have like a good relationship, a good connection and stuff. And so, but I haven't really heard a lot of stories from like a birth parent's perspective of, like, I made this decision, I did this.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I hardly ever hear the birth mother side or the birth father side, and I think it is such an important part of the story, if not the most important part, because without you, there'd be no child. So
Right. There would be no adoption stories to tell.
exactly, exactly. So I think it's such an important side of the story to tell, and I'm so thankful that you're so open and so honest and candid about your story. So thank you.
Of course. I'm so happy I could share my story because I feel like a lot of people, like a lot of birth moms should like know that, it's okay what you did. You shouldn't feel bad about it.
100%. I think that's such an important message to share. And kind of couple of closing thoughts. I'm sure as your daughter gets older, you'll continue to navigate it beautifully as you have done so far. But are there any particular things that actually really help maintain a positive relationship with your daughter and the adoptive parents through the open adoption process?
I definitely think, when I first made the plan, I had set the kind of ground rules of I would like to see her around her birthday and at Christmas. And if it's more, great. If it doesn't happen one year, that's fine. But I definitely think it's a good like kind of meeting point at times to where it's like, okay, where are we all in our lives? Like, how is she doing? How is she growing? How are we doing? Like, is everyone still feeling comfortable in this situation? Because I think that's what's most important to everyone is that the adoptive parents are comfortable with me being in her life, and that I'm comfortable with still seeing her and knowing who she is, but she doesn't really know who I am yet.
It sounds like you've all been really considerate of each other and shown a lot of empathy for each other to make sure you navigate it the best way possible.
They're a great family. I got really lucky with meeting them.
And I mean, they got lucky with meeting you too, so it definitely works both ways.
Definitely does.
And kind of knowing what you know now, is there any advice or anything you'd say to the 17-year-old version of yourself, or even to other birth mums going through something similar?
I would say to like other birth moms and probably to 17-year-old me is that you're going to have a lot of people telling you what they think is best for you, and in the nicest way possible you have to tell them to kind of mind their own business, and that this is something for you to decide. It's your choice and you have to do what you think is best at the end of the day, and regardless of what that is, you stand firm and make sure you're happy with your choice.
Perfectly said. Well, thank you so much for having this chat with me. Again, like I said, I really appreciate how open and honest and how eloquently you speak about your experience. So, truly, thank you for coming on.
Of course, thank you so much for having me. Again, I was really excited to be able to talk about this and share with the world my story.
As we wrap up today's conversation, I want to thank Mackenzie again for sharing her story so openly. One thing this chat really highlights is that when it comes to adoption, there is no single right decision. Every birth mother has the right to make the choice that feels right for her and her circumstances. I also really admire the maturity and care Mackenzie has shown in the way she's navigated her relationship with her daughter's adoptive parents. It's clear there's a lot of respect there, and I imagine that kind of openness is really what helps relationships like this grow over time. Stories like Mackenzie's are so important because birth mothers' voices are so often missing from conversations about adoption. Hearing these perspectives helps us better understand the complexity, love, and thought that can go into making an adoption plan. I'm very grateful to Mackenzie for trusting me with her story. We release new episodes every other Tuesday, and you can follow us at Not Made in China Podcast on Instagram and TikTok. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you next time.